was not a threat involved. If they were hostile or aggressive, they would have been over a long time ago. Now, what was their purpose? Well, the study was not able to conclude that. It said that the military committee will continue this research, which indicated to me that the study in some form had continued, that this document in '64 was simply an initial conclusion.
Okay.
But when they concluded that there were 4 different extraterrestrial groups involved, and one of them was totally human, looked just like us, that was a big shock to the old traditional mindset of the military. Mm-hmm. The admirals and the generals, you know, they couldn't deal with it.
And it also said that there was something to do with the religions, that all the religions of the world.
Well, let me tell you, the study was not that thorough. It was a beginning for me.
Okay.
It was the initiative, the initial event that triggered my curiosity. It launched me on 40 years of research. Mm-hmm. And much of what I've concluded has been a result of the years of study since. You see, I continued to dig. I continued to probe. I continued to turn over rocks. As I said, I drove my friends up the wall.
Okay, you looked at this material, you learned a lot, you weren't the only one, you've convinced me of that. Supposedly, I mean, these people that you know also read it, they weren't your close friends, I'm assuming.
Well, they were not my dearest, closest friends, no.
Okay, but were you able to talk to them or have relationships with them outside of, like, 1967? Did you ever compare notes?
We formed, back in those days, what we called the Old Boys Network. And this network was made up of people like myself, enlisted and commissioned, of all services, Air Force, Marines, Army, Navy, as I said, all ranks. Mm-hmm. There were others like me who were so engrossed by this and excited by it and what it meant. You hear a few of them coming out even today, those that are still alive, saying what I saw, what I learned, what I concluded, the reports I studied, the contacts that I knew happened. Some of them had contacts themselves.
Sure. Personal
contacts with some of these guys.
Okay, so
Phil Corso was an example. You familiar with who he was?
Absolutely.
I knew Phil fairly well. He and I were speakers at several conferences together. And in Italy, I got to know him pretty well. Phil shared with me things that he had happened to him. Not just what he had seen, but he had personal contact with an alien at White Sands. He was in charge of the security of the range one time. And something came in, the radar picked it up. He hopped in his car, went out to see what the hell it was. There is a UFO sitting on the ground. There's a guy standing beside it. And Corso walks over to him and says, you know, what the hell are you, who are you, and where are you from, and why are you here? And this fellow says, I just came to talk. And Corso asked him, he says, well, are you with us or are you against us? Simple military type question, you know, are you with me or are you against me? Mm-hmm. And the guy says, neither. We're neither for you or are we against you. And he had a conversation with this guy that lasted over an hour. And the guy says, please turn off your radar. It disturbs my control or my guidance system so I can leave. Corso went back to the shop or back to the headquarters, turned off the radar, and away he went. I got to know, through the Old Boys Network, dozens of guys like myself who were as excited and enthused about the thing as I was.
But they didn't become whistleblowers. What's the difference?
Some of them did. Some of them lost their commissions. Some of them lost their
Can you
rank.
name somebody? If they became a whistleblower, do I know them?
No.
What happened?
Many of them just retired and died.
Okay, so they tried to blow the whistle, but they didn't get known. They haven't lasted.
Let me explain something
that you have that allowed you to
I was one of the loudest loudmouths. And this is my nature. I retired as a command sergeant major. Mm-hmm. And that rank gives me the privilege to open my big yap to anybody. The generals, the admirals, and everybody in between. You see? It's a unique kind of rank to have.
I see.
The generals depend on you to tell them the truth.
Ah.
Whether they like it or not. And so you learn to tell them the truth. Well, I turned out to be a big mouth. I sat on this for, when did I come out of the closet, so to speak? Just term.
Right.
Yeah.
From 1967.
I sat on this until from 67 to 92 or 1. 91? I believe I came out of the closet in 91.
Okay. So that's a long time.
Yeah. I respected my oath, which I swore. Mm-hmm. I took an oath to never share anything that I learned of classified nature while I was on active duty. And I knew that if I did, I could go to prison for 10 years, $10,000 fine, forfeiture of all pay and allowances, retirement, everything, whatever, forever.
Okay, so you've come out. What happened to you?
So I came out in 91 at a conference in Tucson, Arizona.
All right.
The result was of monumental aggravation and frustration that the government had continued over all these years to lie to the people. Not only were they lying to the people, they were ruining lives to keep the lid on this subject. And I had enough of that.
Okay.
I had seen good friends of mine, guys who, they had said something to the wrong person at the wrong way at the wrong time, and they sent them to Iceland. You know?
They reassigned them?
They assigned them to Iceland without their families.
Ah.
A 3-year assignment in Iceland. That's like the Russians sending you to Siberia.
Okay.
And we have this in this country, the ability to do that. There are assignments here and there that, you know, I don't want to use the wrong term and embarrass you, but you've heard the term annus mundi? We have places on the earth where we have military bases, and if you send you there, everybody says, bye. We'll probably never hear from you again, you know.
Okay, but that didn't happen to you.
No, it didn't. And
why
let
not?
me tell you,
know
something.
Why?
Yeah. The more I learned, the more aggravated I became. And at 91, I think it was, when I came out, Wendell Stevens is a good friend of mine, member of the Old Boys Network, retired Lieutenant Colonel, Air Force fighter pilot. Okay. Wendell is still alive down in Tucson. He and I were close for years. When I retired from the Army, I bought a house in Tucson, and lo and behold, I found I was right across the street from Stevens. Anyhow, he went to prison. And it was a trumped-up, fixed political deal. I always suspected it was because he had spoken out openly on the subject.
Okay.
Now, there were people who say, no, political deal. I always suspected it was because he had spoken out openly on the subject.
Okay.
Now, there were people who say, no, Wendell just made a dumb mistake, and he broke the law, and off he went. He spent, 3 years in prison. Well, there's an example for you, where people say, well, he screwed up. Well, I never did believe the man screwed up that way. I think that partly him going to jail was a result of him being very outspoken.
Okay.
Now, that's a threat that you face. In 91, I was up to here. My first marriage was on the rocks for a variety of reasons. I was in a new job. I took a job with the Sheriff's Department. I was actually working for FEMA as an emergency management director. But I was just so frustrated and so aggravated of waiting for the government to tell the people a little something. And then I was so frustrated and angered by the fact that not only were they not telling them the truth, they were telling them blatant lies. And they were also destroying people's lives. There were people who had contacts, who the government would place in what they called, what is it, the police put you in protective
custody?
Well, not just custody. They
A
create
safe
a whole
house?
new life for you.
Oh, yeah, okay.
I had seen examples of military families' lives destroyed because someone...
the person spoke out?
Well, a pilot would come back from a mission, and before they got to him, he said something to somebody. My God, you should have seen what I saw up there. There was this damn ship flying along beside me, and there were faces at the windows looking at me. And this went public. And this poor son of a bitch, they took him and sent him to Kwajalein, I believe. Some tiny little atoll in the middle of the Pacific where you can't take your family. And he went off to Kwajalein for God knows how long, away from his family, because he said one thing. I learned all these things. It struck me that this was not fair, this was not right, that no government, damn it, has the right to do that to people, and I came out of the closet in a big way.
Right.
Not only did I share everything I learned at SHAPE in the study, the assessment, which in itself is dynamite, but the real dynamite is all the stuff I've learned since. And I learned even after I retired from the Army in '76, I still had a clearance. I worked for FEMA. I got what the equivalent of a master's degree in emergency management at the Institute in Emmitsburg, Maryland.
Okay, but they didn't come get you and send you off to Siberia.
No, they didn't, because once I opened my big yap, I had people come to tell me that, Bob, that's your only defense. That's the only security you got. Keep talking. Because if they come and shut you up now, it'll be so obvious to the world that you've been closed down that much of what you've been talking about must be true. As I told you, I think I shared with Bill, I was intimidated. I had phone calls on people who wouldn't identify themselves. Male voices saying, don't you think you've talked about this just about enough? Why don't the hell time for you to shut up? Who's this? Never mind. Keep your damn mouth shut on this. Click. I had a number of those. I had a little house in Tucson in a cul-de-sac. I lived there. I bought it years ago. Bought it in 60-something. I'm sitting there one day reading or whatever, and I hear a very distinctive sound. I knew a helicopter. I know the sound of a Huey because I'd been in Vietnam.
Okay.
And the Huey has a distinctive sound all of its own. And I thought, is it passing over? And it kept, and the damn thing was sitting over my house. So I go out the door into the driveway and I look up and there's this totally black Huey-type helicopter not more than 100 feet above my house, violating FAA rules, totally violating the rules, but the damn thing was sitting up there, and there was not a marking on it, not one mark on it. It was totally black, and that was a violation of FAA, Now, these guys violate the law all the time. And I stood out there, and I thought, who the hell are you? And I looked up and studied it, and there was this big circular, glassy apparatus on the bottom of this thing. It was part of the aircraft. And I concluded later that it was probably one of those 360-degree windows. And there were probably guys sitting in there looking at me down through this glass. But it was black, totally black. The glass was black. The thing was sitting up there and just kind of like, that. What are you going to do about it? And I shook my fist, pointed my finger. mouthed a couple of profanities,
Uh-huh.
called him a number of names. I know you son of a bitch. I know who you are, and I know what you're doing.
Okay.
And about the time I really am giving them hell, I'm sure they thought, all right, we've got his attention. Off it went. First of all, totally black, no markings violation. Hovering over a private residence violation.
Sure.
You know, they don't care. It was an intimidation. And this was right after I had went public.
Okay.
At this big conference in Tucson.
So
no, they don't care. It was an intimidation. And this was right after I had went public.
Okay.
At this big conference in Tucson.
So tell me, you have friends at high places, because I know you've spent some time in Washington. Who's protecting you? Because is it human? Is it extraterrestrial?
Let me tell you what I think.
Okay.
And this is just my 2 cents.
Okay.
I think that after I came out publicly with a big mouth and spoke and began to speak regularly at that time, from 91 on, I traveled the world. Good God, I was invited. I've been 18 countries. I think going public and being out in the open probably was what saved me. Other than the phone calls and the Black Huey and all of the rest of it, you know, I've had people come up to me at conferences, guys, who would not introduce themselves and would, suits, you know what the term suits means?
Sure.
3-piece with vest, typical government agency type thing. You've been speaking out pretty bluntly about this. Why are you doing this? Well, who are you? Well, never mind. Why are you doing this? Well, first of all, the truth has to be told. Oh, yeah? You think you know the truth? And I think, well, I know some of it. How's that? Mm-hmm. As a matter of fact, I know quite a bit of it. That's even better. And, you know, I've had those happen, too, over the years. I had an interesting time. I spoke at Leeds at a conference. All right? Got a call from a guy who identified himself as Mr. Sweeting. Typical UK name, I guess, Mr. Sweeting. And we found out Tony Dodd checked the phone number from Mr. Sweeting, who called me and said it was imperative that he speak to me before I went on. And Tony and I both got in the phone booth together, crammed in here. And Tony's listening as I'm talking to Mr. Sweeting, and he says, it's imperative, Mr. Dean, that I speak to you before you go on. What are you going to say? And I says, well, Mr. Sweeting, if you're local, why don't you come to the conference and listen? Well, no, I can't do that. I just wanted to know what you plan to say. And I says, I plan to say a hell of a lot. And Tony checked the number, and guess where? There's an enormous U.S. National Security Agency facility in Yorkshire called Menwith Hill. I've driven by it. Tony took me by it several times.
Sure.
Mr. Sweeting's number was Menwith Hill.
Okay. So what? That's it? Was that the gist of your conversation?
Well, the gist of the conversation was Mr. Sweeting would not say anything to me about who he was and why he wanted to talk to me. And I told him I ain't going to share nothing with him over the phone. If he wants to talk to me, come to the conference. Mm-hmm. And I'd be delighted to talk to him face to face.
Well, on that issue, have you had whistleblowers, people come out from the closet and share stuff with you?
Oh, God, yes.
You're a whistleblower?
Oh, hell yes.
Okay.
I've had people come up to me and say, you know, I've been wanting to share this, Dean. And I think I can share with you because you won't take my name and address and phone number and turn me in. But this happened to me, and I know that happened to you, and, you know, we've all been members of this, what we call the Old Boys Network. We wanted to get it out, but we wanted to get it out honestly, up front, and democratically, damn it.
So you convinced me that you're out there, but
okay.
I'm still not buying it completely because do you think that have you had health problems? Have you had, mind control? And if not, then I have to ask you again, who's protecting you?
Well, let me say this about that. It sounds like Nixon. I have shared this with people several times because they've asked me the same question.
Sure.
And after I became notorious, I suppose is the best word, where I have spoken bluntly, regularly, all over the damn planet and all over the United States, to a considerable amount of positive response from people. Mm-hmm. Not only military, thanking me for going public. Okay. And I've got a number of close, warm friends that retired, mm-hmm. that have, to a level of some degree, a good friend in Roswell, retired Army sergeant, who after he went public, his son was killed by a hit and run. And they always concluded that it was the result of his going public.
Clifford Stone.
Clifford lost his boy.
We interviewed him, yeah.
Clifford is a very close friend. And his boy was killed right after he had published his book. Now you say, oh, coincidence. Bullshit. I've seen a lot of coincidence in my time, and I don't believe in it.
Okay.
I don't believe there is such a thing as coincidence. Mm-hmm. In everybody's life, there are no coincidences. It's all laid out. Clifford is like me now. He's turned into a recluse.